Hi, it's Amanda. Do me a favor and put on some headphones, or make sure you at least have good speakers. Headphones would be good though, and just listen to this for a second. Just trust me. Welcome to The Art of Asking Everything. This is Amanda Palmer. So I'm doing something a little pre-podcast right now. Hopefully, if everything goes well, my podcast is going to be launching in September or sometime in the fall. And I've been traveling and touring all over the world, banking and hoarding these podcast interviews, but I wanted to share this one early because this guest who I interviewed this past March at South by Southwest, Lingua Ignota, has an album out right now, and I wanted to help spread the word about it. And also, I thought this might be a nice teaser to just give you a little taste of what the podcast coming is going to be like if you haven't heard one of these little teasers yet. So, Lingua Ignota, her music came into my life in the most beautiful way. I have this friend, Cormac Bride. He's a musician from Boston that I've been friends with for 20 years. He knows me really well, and he knows my taste really well. And he came to my house about a year ago in the summer of 2018 because I was throwing one of my goth parties in the woods, and he opened up for me, and we did some crazy goth covers together. And he was staying over at my house, and he said, before I leave your house, I just need your attention for like 10 minutes. I need to play you something. And like, it kept not being a good time. And, you know, I've got my teeny child running around and this show to put on, and it kept not being a good time. It kept not being a good time. And then finally he was like, Amanda, I just need you for 10 minutes. And I was all irritated. I was like, what could possibly be so important? And he grabbed me and took me to a quiet part of the house, and he sat me down on a couch, and he just put his headphones on my head. And he just said, close your eyes, listen to this. And the song was Woe to All on the Day of My Wrath by Lingua Ignota.
My master pulled me from my bed, ripped every curl from out my head, held me down to strip me bare, said hell is real, I'll take you there. Oh, master, please be kind. Don't leave me somewhere God won't find. Don't drag me to a sea of flame, from which I'll never rise again.
And at the end of that 10 minutes, I opened my eyes and I looked at him and I said, you know me so well. And
thank you, I fucking love you. I now need to know everything about this artist.
I bring the end.
So I started researching this artist, Lingua Ignota, and I fell in love with her work and her music and her entire way of being. And then I invited her to come open up for my show at South by Southwest. Now, a little bit about Lingua Ignota. If you know your Latin, Lingua Ignota means literally in Latin, unknown language. It's also a concept which was coined by Saint Hildegard, who was a German Benedictine abbess in the 12th century. And she created and used this unknown language for mythical purposes. This was like a secret language that she ascribed to a divine inspiration. And here we are, 700 years later, Kristin Hayter picks up this moniker and sort of expands on this alchemy. And she combines language and mysticism and punk and digital media, trans art to create challenging, beautiful, bizarre stuff that just defies genre. She knows her academic shit and she knows her musical shit. And so here she is, a multidisciplinary, multidimensional artist. And when you listen to her music, you can hear these incredibly disparate influences, classical sounds like opera and church liturgy sounds, but also, you hear noise and hardcore. I've been describing her to my friends as a cross between Merzbow, this extreme Japanese noise artist, and Diamanda Galas. She makes very intense personal music. That means I have a lot in common with her. So I really wanted to get together with her when she opened up for me to just talk about everything. And now that she's got the new album coming out, it seems like a perfect time to do this. So the album that I heard that Woe to All is on is called All Bitches Die. Her new album is called Caligula. And I just have to remind you that the venue that we were about to play in when I did this recording was the Central Presbyterian Church in Austin, Texas. So when you listen to her music and you think about my last record, There Will Be No Intermission, which is literally, songs that are graphically about abortion, and her music, which is graphically about sexual assault and rape, you can imagine that I was slightly nervous taking this show to the Central Presbyterian Church. But I'm happy to report that the church was really supportive and loved the show. So without further ado, this is my conversation recorded in March with Kristin Hayter, a.k.a. Lingua Ignota. For someone who's never heard you, doesn't know your music, doesn't know your background, how would you like to describe yourself?
I think for people who've never heard my work, I would describe it as super confrontational, death industrial, Baroque classical, blackened. I've totally decided to disregard genre and style completely. Good. Yeah. I'm sort of a multidisciplinary artist, and I'm a vocalist as well, and compose and write music and then perform it.
So when I started researching your music and your stuff, one of the things that I actually found most fascinating is how academic you were. Mm-hmm. So you went to Brown.
Yeah.
And you really studied up on the kind of art that you then created. Mm-hmm. And your work is a marriage of a lot of things. Like there's songwriting and there's performance art and mm-hmm. there's the transmission of information and energy. And you even wrote a thesis. Mm-hmm. Will you tell us about the thesis? Because
yeah,
it's
of course.
Amazing.
Yeah, the thesis I wrote for the master's degree at Brown was.
And what was the master's degree in?
It's in digital language arts, which at this point nobody really knows what that is. It's it's a discipline that only exists there, but kind of exploring just technologically mediated text or what technology can do for text as an art form. But the thesis was called Burn Everything, Trust No One, Kill Yourself. And it started out being this text that was algorithmically assisted using a Markov chain, which is like a predictive text language. So if you have like a series of words, it will try to predict what future series of words are, like onward into infinity or however long you want to process it. And so I started culling together all of this language from the internet and from liner notes and from lyrics, from genres of extreme music that kind of mythologize misogyny.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
And when you say extreme music, explain.
Ultimately, the meaning of extreme music is music that's meant to be like exclusive or exclusionary and not inclusive. So it doesn't approach any sort of mainstream ideas of what music should be. So stuff like black metal, death metal, extreme forms of metal, noise, hardcore, and power violence, and all that stuff. So that's what I mined, and I just took all their lyrics. I took stuff from their message boards, which are like notoriously nasty, and just kind of put it all together. And then I also took documents from my own life, texts that I had received or voicemails that I'd received and transcribed, like police documents. And then I put that all into like a big pile as source material, and then I put that through the Markov chain and generated this 10,000 page text. Originally, I didn't know that it was going to be a 10,000 page text. I thought it was going to be just like sort of large.
What size font? That's an important question.
Yeah. It's 12 point Helvetica.
That's a lot of pages.
Yes.
It's a lot of words.
When we went to actually make the thesis and we had to have this document to put in the archive at Brown, I was becoming sort of more invested in the text itself. And I was like, I don't want this to be something that can be archived. I want it to be something that people have to deal with. And it's something that can't be on paper necessarily. It's going to be too large. And then to think of like what it means to have a dumb thesis archived in an Ivy League school where no one can access it. I decided to make it my body weight in paper, to make it 100 pounds of paper. And then it turned into an installation. And then it turned into a cycle of songs.
So you took text out of the thesis and turned them into songs?
Yeah. I turned it into a cycle of songs based on Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. Really exploring the idea of, because it's such an important piece of music, like so lauded. But it does kind of the same thing that a lot of the music that I cataloged does. I mean, there's a really long history of violence against women in classical music and all music, and that's what the Rite of Spring is about ultimately. I mean, not ultimately, but no one ever talks about the young girl who sacrifices herself or dances herself to death for the village elders. So I made it about her, kind of, and about, us. So
before you did that song cycle based on the text that came out of the thesis, had you written songs before? Had you performed music before?
Like 10 years previous, I'd only been working in an academic context. I'd been doing stuff coming out of the Art Institute of Chicago based around text and sound also, but kind of in a more pataphysical, not like emotionally charged way, like very much academic and a little bit drier, and more kind of focused on technology and different modes of how I could use technologically mediated voice or whatever to make work. When I found the kind of like emotional aspect, honestly, it was kind of like being in the DIY scene in Providence was what pushed me to do that, because I saw that work was so raw, and it was so, the stuff that people were making was so visceral.
When you say extreme music, what I think about is basically all the stuff you listed, right? Like I think of like Merzbow, and I think of Masana, and I think of noise, and I think of really loud, screamy, aggressive, confrontational, high volume music. Is there anything that you can think of, I mean, maybe besides you, that's extreme, that is not necessarily a wall of noise, that doesn't necessarily have to do with like physical volume, but has to do with something else?
Yeah, I think typically we do associate it with high octane aggression.
It's been really interesting for me on this record that I just put out, And to now have to confront reviews, which I just don't really want to do.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have such a, like, especially at this point in my career, I have such a deep belief in just the music itself, because I've seen it work. I kind of haven't, like, I don't need someone else to go validate it. I've played a lot of these songs a lot.
Yes.
I've seen them work.
Right.
It's kind of all the validation I need.
Right.
But there's something that I think you would have a lot to say about, given what you've studied and now given what you've done and given what you've performed again and again and again, which is what goes on in women's heads when they think about making an artistic offering. And in the entire spectrum of Diamanda Galas over here and Celine Dion over here, and like, let's not even say that that's a straight line. Let's say that, like, we're working in 7 dimensions. What do I have as a woman with a voice and with talent? Where am I going to stick myself on this spectrum? Where am I going to be the most expressive? Where am I going to be the most useful to my tribe if I'm going to get up and, like, bang the bell and be the one that people look at while I speak? Like, which of those things am I going to pick?
Yeah.
And you've picked something extreme, which will, like, obviously never land you in Celine Dion land. And, like, in my other way, in my genre, I've picked something kind of extreme. Like, my stuff is definitely not for everyone. And if you find confessional stuff confrontational, you're going to find this really confrontational.
Right, yes.
One of the things that I've been noticing as I've been thinking about it and also writing about it and writing about it in my talk yesterday for South by is, like, I didn't even really consider the number of hurdles you go over in your head starting as a 13-year-old girl or whatever when you first have the idea that you might stand up in front of an audience and share.
Yeah.
You know, when I think about it, I actually think about a series of doors that close and, like, walls that arise and hurdles that appear when you're, you know, when you're a woman, girl, woman, whatever, trying to figure out which of those voices you're going to be, and where everyone tries to shove you, and where everyone tries to point you, what does and doesn't find approval. And how fucking fascinating that is, especially right now as women are kind of looking around going, like, wait, maybe we don't have to say it this way.
Right.
Maybe we don't have to apologize. Maybe we've only been given this much permission and we should just toss that all out the window and fucking say everything.
Yeah, yeah.
In all ranges of dynamic.
Right, right. I think for me, when I was young, I was considering going to conservatory to study opera. And I wanted to be a vocalist, and I wanted to just perform other people's music, mostly dead white men. I was really interested in that, or thought I was. There's only so much you can do with interpretation, and there's only so much of yourself you can put into interpreting someone else's music. And I eventually fell out of that and went to art school instead and started doing visual and text and sound work. But I think coming to this work, I wanted it to be confrontational and to explore the ideas of gender-based violence in a way that wasn't traditionally feminist. The work is not informed by any kind of feminist school of thought or feminist school of theory or feminist theory, and I don't really think about feminism at all when I make the work. I think about misogyny, and I think about hatred of women, and the attitudes espoused there, and about just re-contextualizing and flipping that attitude instead. So I think that was part of the direction that I decided to go in, was to take this world that kind of, we're all familiar with misogyny, and we all deal with it in really kind of horrifying ways. And I think in a kind of a scary way, that's why it resonates with a lot of people in the extreme music community, and especially a lot of men that I wouldn't think it does, because it doesn't come from that traditional feminist perspective. It comes from a perspective that they recognize almost.
Yeah, you're speaking their language.
But of course, it's not meant to be, misogynist work.
Have you ever felt, in this specific regard, have you ever felt totally misinterpreted or misunderstood?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell a story?
I think that there are some people who either think that I hate men or hate women. And of course, neither of those are true. But I've had people express concern over some of the language that I use in the work that is from a misogynistic attitude or like has a background of misogyny behind it.
Give us an example.
Like cunt.
Just using the word.
Cunt killer, or even bitch, all bitches die. And
so you're saying that have you made feminists upset by using those words?
Yeah.
Because you're just like, that's a no-go, naughty area, and you're not supposed to use that language because it's misogynist?
yes.
Yeah, how do you deal with that? And I mean, how do you deal with it in the arena, and also like, how does it affect you emotionally when you see people interpreting you that way?
I think that if I do anything that people feel is hurtful or harmful, it's important to consider that and to try to understand why. In these particular cases, I very strongly feel that reclaiming that language is important and is an important part of the work as a whole. And I've also realized that because the work is confrontational, the work is like fairly extreme, I can't make everyone happy.
Yeah. Well, and when you name an album All Bitches Die, and I mean, is there a part of you that knows that without context, because a lot of that is just about context, like you have this rich context that you're drawing from, like,
Yeah.
you know, and there's a lot of intelligence and nuance and signifiers going on all over the place. But if you're just picking it up in the record store and you don't know anything about those histories and those lineages, like,
Yeah.
you know, what would you want someone to feel? Like, especially if they're totally uneducated in these academic realms that we're talking about, but they pick up an album that
Right.
says All Bitches Die.
Yeah.
What do you want them to feel? Do you want them to just be, like, intrigued, confused?
I want them to ask questions, I think. Yeah. And so that's part of it, is that some people will ask questions and they won't be happy with what it's about, and that's okay. But I want people to have conversations about this stuff.
I want to make sure that I am not misunderstood. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
You're not going to see any pushback from me. I mean, I'm like, my philosophy about art and this kind of stuff is that it's all got to be allowed, whether or not you serve it up with a giant context condiment buffet.
Right.
That isn't what art ever has been, and it isn't what art should turn into.
No.
Is everything needing 8 million explanations and footnotes in order for it to be palatable
Right.
and safe for the community to digest. You know, in that regard, like, was one of the things I was so happy to see someone doing. Like, your album title made me happy. But also, I looked at the photo of you, and I looked at the tracks, and I listened to them, and I immediately got it. But I could also understand someone who doesn't have all that context going like, wait a second, is she saying that women are bitches? That's bad. We know that that's bad because we've read our feminist articles, and bad.
Yeah.
And I mean, you never know. Like, you never know where something's going to land on someone in their life and
Yes.
in the course of their education.
Right, exactly.
But I also, I've been rethinking a lot of women in music in my life, and doing a lot of like, oh my God, I can't believe it's taken me this long to come around to like what waters I was swimming in and what Kool-Aid I was drinking. And I look back at my teens and 20s, and I remember people giving me Tori Amos CDs because it was so clear that I should like it, because I was I was also a piano singer-songwriter talking about really dark stuff. And I just absolutely abhorred it. I was like, that's not for me. It cannot be my thing. I like literally couldn't listen to it, couldn't hear it.
Right.
Didn't want to hear it for whatever reason. And it was the same thing with Anita Franco. So many people were like, well, you must love Anita Franco. And I was like, I don't even want to hear it. I can't even listen to it. It's, you know, and when I look back at that, it all seems so sadly obvious that I couldn't handle sharing the space with another woman, that I was coming from total scarcity and fear and a sense of competition.
Yeah.
That if I were to even accept that what they were doing was legitimate, there wouldn't be a place at the fucking table for me.
Right.
And how tragic that is.
It is.
Because it also means that none of those songs were available to me. I just went back to listening to
Nick Cave and Swans and The Cure and all of the male artists that completely informed my environment.
Yeah.
And there were no female voices.
Yeah.
I literally wouldn't let them in.
Yeah, I understand. It's terrifying. Like it's terrifying the way that we're forced to compete with each other. It's horrifying.
But I also look back and there's another layer of it, which is not only was I closed off to what they had to say and how they did it, but I think part of where that came from is I saw them being kind of led into the ghetto. I saw how people talked about their music. I didn't see them being like revered and worshipped by my cool friends and by the music press. I saw them kind of being lightly dismissed, and I saw people rolling their eyes at Ani DeFranco and rolling their eyes at Tori Amos as like annoying, crazy woman music, writing about subjects that no one's really interested in except crazy feminists. And I just, and at 15 years old, I must have been taking really, close mental notes. Like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be uncool like that. I don't want to be stuck over there. Like, run in the opposite direction. We're so tribal.
Yeah.
I wanted to be liked and accepted by my friends. I wanted to be cool. I wanted to be the kind of artist that my older boyfriend might actually one day stand up and say, this is the thing. She can be up there with Current 93 and Swans and Coil, like she belongs to the canon. And I was like, how do I position myself to get there? Clearly not by doing what these women are doing, because these women are just made fun of. And I'm only really realizing a lot of this stuff as I get into my late 30s and 40s and I backtrack and I go, oh my God, wait. And now, now I'm them. Now I'm watching, journalists in their 20s, dismissing me because they can't handle hearing my voice. And mostly, I'm not complaining, mostly this record is doing fucking phenomenally and people are like, oh my God, I get it, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But, like, I feel so fucking lucky and, meeting people like you and knowing that there are people who just manage to, like, get out of there. And yet, so many women are still stuck in there.
Yeah.
That, like, the bandwidth of what women are allowed to say in music, it's like, there's one teeny shelf in IKEA, and that's it. It's like, it's the red one or the blue one.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's scary.
Yeah, I totally understand what you mean and where you're coming from. You don't want to be in that zone where you're dismissed. So it's a lot easier to align yourself with males who are respected. And it's sad.
My thoughts lately about these hurdles and where we choose to try to express ourselves, because we're always making a choice. You could make extreme music. You could also pick up an acoustic guitar and just write road trip songs if you wanted to.
Yes.
You're certainly intelligent enough. You've made a choice. And the last 7 years of my life, which all basically biographically gave birth to the songs on this record that I just put out, I noticed as I was going into this era, and interestingly, it also had a lot to do with me picking up the ukulele kind of as a joke, but my songs were becoming much more literal. Like, even as I was bending into this era. And I think my songs were becoming more literal because I was less afraid to speak directly.
Right.
But I was also afraid that if I wrote direct, literal music, I wouldn't be considered cool. Because there is this bizarre set of metrics, whether you're, just a music listener or, in the music community, or there are critics, or they're the way I know I interpreted music when I was 14, 15, 20, 25. And there's something very sexy about not really being able to understand what someone is saying. When you look back at, like, you name it, opera, poetry, the era, the realm of totally impressionistic, obfuscated lyrics is pretty new.
Yeah.
You know, we don't go back and see a lot of poetry from the 1800s where no one really knows what the poet is saying, and it could be interpreted 19 million ways, and it's just like Keats meets Radiohead. But since that was the music that raised me, and that especially, like, I was taken by my sort of musical mentors as a teenager, and I was steered in a very particular direction in terms of what was awesome. Swans were awesome, Current 93 was awesome, Coil was awesome, Legendary Pink Dots, The Cure was a little too mainstream, but it's okay. You can bring The Cure and Depeche Mode with you if you want. Nick Cave is awesome, you know, the end. DAF is awesome.
Right.
Like, and in some of that music, there's some directness, but mostly it was a giant collage of like, I have no idea what the fuck this is about.
Right.
So clearly that's how cool people make music, so clearly that's the way I should be writing. And if you listen to the early Dresden Dolls stuff, I'm like, it's schizophrenic. There are the songs where it's just like, I don't even really know what I'm writing about. I know that it's around this feeling, but I couldn't fucking tell you what those lyrics really mean. I just know that I was sort of like impressionistically grabbing at straws. And those songs are amazing. I would stand by them any day, and I still love playing them, and I still love reinterpreting them and rejiggering them. And then there's songs where it's very fucking obvious what I'm talking about, and I'm telling a story A, B, C, D, E. The songs that I was writing back then that were really direct and literal were never about serious subjects. When I took my serious subjects about rape or about whatever, anything very dark, those always got put in
Abstraction.
Massive abstraction, many costumes, lots of curtains that you were going to have to, and you'd never get to the end.
Absolutely.
And on this record, I think I got to the point where I was like, I think I can get away with not doing that.
And like for my work, and this goes back to like the direction, like I do choose to inhabit that kind of male dominated space intentionally.
Male dominated space.
Yeah, that like that extreme music zone of like, I mostly only play metal shows or noise shows. Most of the time I'm the only woman on the bill.
What about the audience? What's the general gender makeup of your typical audience?
My typical audience is, I would say it's like 70% men, 30% women.
We should tour together, because we'll just cancel each other right the fuck out.
I also have a lot of non-binary fans, which I think is really cool, and I deeply love them. I have a good percentage of women, but I would like there to be more. I would like women to feel good about coming to shows that I play. I think sometimes like the bill that I'm on might be a turnoff.
Yeah. I've been following you on Instagram, and your Instagram feed is amazing, by the way. Thank you for it. You should follow it. And you've been supporting a lot of bands. And I mean, I just did a panel yesterday with Ben Folds where we talked about support nightmare moments. Ben Folds was opening for John Mayer for an entire tour playing for 15,000 people a night, and everyone, literally every night, was booing him. 3,000 people out of 15,000 people literally screaming and booing him while he's playing.
That's horrifying.
And his way of dealing with it, aside from flipping the audience off and standing on his piano and mooning them, was he would just play Bitches Ain't Shit on loop until his support slot was over.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Folds is his own style of performance art punk rock. And then I talked about the pain of being in the Dresden Dolls when our second album dropped, and opening up for Panic at the Disco because our label threatened to pull our funding if we didn't go on another band's sold-out tour. And we had nothing against the band, but we were so defeated. We were just so disheartened. Like, we were literally playing shows where none of our fans could get in the door. It was the worst.
Wow.
And then we dealt with that very creatively on certain nights by just literally going pure noise. It was like the only thing we could come up with.
Yes.
We were just like Brian just like, and I would play the piano with my arm.
Yes.
It was awesome. And nobody got it. I mean, there were no, like, most of the audience were under 17, and they just had like, there weren't even the few people out there who were like, yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I talked about in my talk that I gave at South by Southwest yesterday was about the space that a woman, and any artist, but I only have experience as me, like the literal physical and emotional space that needs to be created, that needs to be available if you're going to do something really gnarly.
Yeah.
If you're going to sing a song about rape, if you're going to actually weep at the piano about an abortion, if you're going to do it, it's not something that gets discussed a lot, but I certainly think about it a fucking lot. The person behind the board has to be the right person. The people in the room have to be the right people. The space has to be the right space. Basically at every step of the process, from like the time a song gets written and then taken out in fetal form into the world to the time it gets, lands on a record store shelf or on, a digital music platform or at a show, it's impossible to do any of these things alone. We can't. I mean, you can try, but mostly if you want to do these things well, there's always other people who have to hold the space and make it good and make it right. And so often, and I mean, it took me fucking forever to even realize in the recording studio that I could ask for certain things. I just thought that I was there to like do my job and do it right, and everyone else was kind of in charge. And then slowly I started to realize, like, oh, if I'm singing a song about rape and I don't want to look in the control room and see someone on their phone, I can say, please, when I'm singing my song about rape, like, don't be on your phone.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you guys actually know what it requires to stand here in front of a mic and sing about a rape, but it requires that I not look into the control room and see you on your phone. And every other iteration of that to like what these, like, because we know 95% of the music industry is male.
Yep.
And in a lot of instances, I don't even think that they're inconsiderate. I just think a lot of them don't know.
Yeah.
They just haven't been informed or educated that, this artist, this moment, this situation, this context requires something different of you.
Yeah.
So could you do that thing? And a lot of this, like, again, is only coming to me sort of retroactively as I'm looking back at my whole career and also at the record I just made. And now I'm analyzing it going like, oh, like what was required for me to be able to even write a record like this and then to be able to record it and now to be able to tour it. None of the things that were required were accidents. And the fact that I had them are now things that I really do not want to take for granted and that I would like to explain to women and men so that more women can do that.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's really important.
And you must have something to say about that, given what you do and how you do it.
Right. I also have mostly not thought that you should ask anything of anyone when you are singing a song about rape or assault or violence done to you. I actually, that really hadn't occurred to me so far. Because I have such a hard time asking anything of anyone anyways. But
Quick join the club. The human race.
But I tend to specifically choose environments that are maybe have more hostility in them to sing my most like soul-bearing songs, like "Holy Is the Name of My Ruthless Acts," which is so quiet and so and is like maybe the most brutal lyrically, and is explicitly about rape, or rapists being dead. I choose to sing that in environments that feel nasty to me, or in zones that I feel are a little bit more aggressive towards me.
Well, there's something kind of about that can fuel the material.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I know I need it, even in material like this record now, which is super, you know, it's more gentle, personal. Oh my God, when I have something to push back against, or someone to convince, or someone has just brutally criticized me just before going on stage, like it's way easier. I have to thank those critics often because they sort of force me out.
Yeah, exactly. So I like to move around there, but I do think that it's really important to create that space and to make it okay for women to ask for things that facilitate making raw and important work, because I think a lot of us are scared to do it, and there's no environment in which to do it that feels okay. I mean, that's literally like you do it in a place that feels fucking terrible all the time. It would be nice if it didn't feel terrible.
Does it feel easier and easier as you exercise the muscle of strength in the face of adversity and you sing these songs over and over and over and over and over and over and over again in front of different audiences? Do you feel like every night you have a little more fortitude and that it is actually a muscle that you exercise, or does it in some ways sometimes feel harder to do it again and again?
It feels harder to do it again and again.
Really?
Yeah. It's become easier technically most of the time. Like, it's become easier to move through the performance and to do it. I think at the beginning, performing this music was cathartic for me and was exciting to perform. And 2 years, maybe, I don't know how many years this record has been out, 2 years into touring and performing, which is not very long, I feel exhausted by it a little bit. I feel a little bit exhausted by kind of being tolerated. I also feel that it's just necessary to do. Like, I feel like I can't stop. There's no other reason to keep going, kind of. So
you should do what I did in my set, which is just throw in a Disney song. Just throw it in. Just throw it in, mix it up.
I like to do different things, or do things that are unusual for the sets, or to create some kind of different atmosphere. I'm working on that now. I think kind of reaching like the final chapter of All Bitches Die, and like this part is closing out, and then a new part is opening up. So I think it makes sense. It's been I've been working with this stuff exclusively for a while now.
Tell me what it feels like to be in those moments when you're supporting a band, you're there, you're confronting, like literally physically, you're confronting this audience of mostly men who didn't know necessarily what to expect of you. But I'm also really interested in what it feels like when it works. Like when you are totally embodied and doesn't even matter if you've captivated or captured the audience, like you know that what you are doing is working. Why does that happen when it happens, and how does it feel?
I feel like every time I play a show, it is largely from that support perspective so far. And it is typically from, I think it's a great privilege to have opened for the bands that I have. I mean, The Body is amazing, and they're super great friends of mine, and I adore them. I got to open for Daughters. They're incredible. I got to open for Amun-Ra in Germany just now, and they're insane. It's just really incredible bands. So I feel very lucky to witness what they do and learn from them. Yeah, they have fans who are there to see them, and are there to, if they come early, they're there to tolerate me. And I feel like it's my job to be a fucking monster and burn the building down. And so I feel it's my goal to instill fear in people who have done harm in the room, and to
That's hashtag goals.
and to make people understand who don't understand or who don't care, and then to honor people who have shared my experiences. So I want to do all that at once. And I feel like if I don't do that, I fail. And then there's also like, I have to do that for the people working the venue who, you know, typically are like, oh, it's a girl who maybe she can sing. Like that's maximum what I am. And then I have to, you know, the best.
Is there something really satisfying about that? I mean, is there
When you
something really
prove them
satisfying?
wrong? Oh,
yeah,
yes.
I mean, I remember feeling that. I don't feel it as often as I used to, but definitely with the Dresden Dolls of just getting like all the dudes in the venue just rolling their eyes, going, and then you open your mouth and you see their eyes widen and they sort of start to quake.
Yeah.
It's kind of an exciting, satisfying moment.
It's great. I love, one of my favorite things is when the sound guy comes up after, he's like, that was fucking gnarly. That was the scariest thing I've ever seen. That's happened a few times. Yeah, I'm always looking for that response. But a lot of times it doesn't work. A lot of times I fail. And
How do you define failure?
As not doing everything that I set out to do, and convincing, like I feel like I have to convince everyone in the room. And it's very hard on me, or I'm very hard on myself, admittedly.
I can relate.
Yeah.
That's why support slots are the worst, because you almost never make it to the finish line.
Never make it. But when it does work, you can feel that there's no air in the room, that everyone is stuck with me in my suffering.
This is what we enjoy as artists. This is like our happy place. I mean, I'm with you. That's my happy place, and that's why we picked this job.
Yes.
I mean, I feel that way on this record.
Yeah. I felt that with you when I listened to the record. I weep with you on the record, for sure.
It does feel like when you get that right, and you're a good enough artist or a good enough performer, it feels like a generous act. It doesn't feel like an aggressive act or an assault or a confrontational act or a violent act.
No, yeah.
It feels like a gift.
Right.
If you can get everyone in the room to be stuck.
Yeah.
And because what you're actually saying, that stuckness, I mean, that's empathy. It's like hardcore, real ass human empathy. All, you know, it happens to be rotating around your story, but it wouldn't be empathy if everybody in the room didn't have it in them to feel it. So at that point, if you really have nailed it, everyone is kind of egoless.
Yes.
And you happen to have opened the door, but everyone is in that room.
Right.
Because of the words that have been spoken and how they've been transmitted, and everyone is on the plane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are moments also where it feels like I am no longer myself, and I'm just a receptacle or a vessel for other people, and I reflect back to them what they need taken away and provide a catharsis for them as well. That is rewarding as well.
Can I ask you about the recording of All Bitches Die? Where did you actually track it?
In my shed in Rhode Island.
And was there someone else there, or were you recording it? Yeah. So you actually did have complete autonomy, which in some ways may have made it easier. I mean, probably did make it easier for you to just get exactly what you needed.
Yes.
You had total control over the environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of my greatest regrets, and I don't really believe in regrets, but, you know, I have a few. Or at least, you know, I go back and I'm like, oh, how would it have been different? Thought experiments. You know, I used to 4-track all my own music back when everything was 4-tracked. So all my first songs as a teenager and into my early 20s, and I was actually pretty good at it.
Yeah.
You know, I had one MIDI verb, you know, reverb station. I had one 4-track. I had 3 mics, and I just did everything myself. And then when the Dresden Dolls started recording, there were drums, so there was no way I was going to tackle
Right.
that alone. And also we had, it was like we were in a college town, we had friends, they had studios, the studios had mics and boards, and I just abandoned my act of self-recording. And then I kind of never picked it back up again. And I was just talking with Ben Folds about this very thing. Every time I tried to pick it back up again, the technology actually just crushed my head, and I couldn't figure out actually how to get back to the simplicity and the mastery of just 4-track.
Yeah.
I was like, I would try to teach myself GarageBand, but then something wouldn't work, and I'd be like, I don't actually know how to troubleshoot this. Fuck it. Like,
Right.
It's just easier. At this point, I have the resources. I have the financial resources to just hire an engineer and go into a studio and do what I need and compartmentalize it. But I'm actually thinking, for reasons that I hadn't fully clocked before, which are emotional reasons, not technical reasons, I want to get myself back into the place where I have complete mastery over my space, because it's about self-consciousness more than it is about anything.
Yeah.
On the one side, that's true, and on the other hand, I'm so proud nowadays, like especially demoing these last 5 or 6 songs on There Will Be No Intermission. I was so fucking proud of myself that I was writing the kind of material that I was in studios all over the world. I wrote one of the songs in South Africa, I wrote one of them in Woodstock. I was sort of bopping around to different studios because of Neil's schedule or my schedule or whatever. And I was like, here I am in a room with 3 male engineers I met this morning, whatever, Steve, Nick, and Dave. It's always Steve, Nick, and Dave, and Mike. And I've just met them, and they don't even know who I am. They've never heard the Dresden Dolls. They're probably not familiar with my material at all. They just know that I'm paying the studio bill today. And I would sit down there and be like, I'm totally present. None of those guys are making me feel self-conscious. In fact, it is a pleasure to make them listen to this. Not in a confrontational way, but in an invitational, like, you just don't scare me anymore.
Yeah.
That has been perhaps the silver lining of getting away from, I need to be in a 4-track alone in my room to do this. Like, all of those men over all of those years in all of those studios, they haven't worn me down. They've opened up the possibility that my self-consciousness just got completely worn away.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And, it still can be weird. When I did the demo for Voicemail for Jill, it was with this engineer, Christopher, in this local upstate New York studio, and I literally wrote it and demoed it the same day in a studio. And I noticed it wasn't even so much about self-consciousness. And I'm actually really interested to start asking artists about this, because it's a weird question. But I have this thing. I even feel it with, I even feel it with Neil. I feel it with everyone. When I write a song, I noticed that when I was sound checking and fiddling, and the engineer, after I wrote this song and it's Voicemail for Jill and was going to demo it, he came back into the control room. I was like, I can't wait until he hears the surprise ending. Like, I want to surprise him with this complete work. I want him to have the full experience of it. So I was like having to kind of like work around everything so that I could deliver him my exciting performance of what it was, and there wouldn't be any air let out of the balloon by accident on the way there. And it's like, how silly are you, Amanda, that you actually believe that? The same way I feel that way at performances on stage, where I really want to impress you. I want you to really buy this. Like, I don't want you to see the assemblage. I want you to see the finished, impactful thing. And that in its way is its own kind of self-consciousness.
Of course.
Or, it's the jazz hands side of me that really wants you to like feel the finale and get up and cheer. Even if you're writing a song about fucking abortion, which just goes to show it's all show business. Like, even when you're doing the most visceral, dark, deep thing. And it's also like, getting back to your opening support stories, like, someone asked me after the talk at South by yesterday, like, what have been some of your most painful experiences? I was talking about being confronted by people and needing space, and I talked about Mackenzie Scott. She's It's Taurus,
Yeah.
and she talks about recording this really personal song called The Exchange, and she was in the studio with this producer, Rob Ellis, and she just wasn't in the space to do it, I guess in front of him or in the studio. She was just like, I'm not. And he gave her a Zoom recorder, and he said, when you're feeling it, anytime, just go do it alone. Let's just do that. And I used that just sort of as an example of how sometimes that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's how you're holding the space for her.
Yeah.
You know, you're not just like lighting candles and saying, walk this way, I've created a great space for you. You're just giving her autonomy. Good.
Yeah.
This woman asked the question, like, what are some of the most horrible moments you've had? And the worst moments I could think of were all sound checks.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And it's like a part of our work that no one sees on purpose, right? It's sound check, that's the point. But it is a weird fucking act.
Yeah.
It's a strange ritual, a sound check, when you're a really emotional artist and you've got people like lugging buckets of ice and you've got people giving no shit and you've got guys with their hands down their pants kind of like checking their phones and blearily looking at you while you're standing there at the mic delivering your rape story or whatever it is you're delivering. And it's so disorienting. It's crazy. And the fact that it's part of our job, and no one ever is like, you're going to take a 40-hour course in learning how to do sound check in front of a bunch of people ignoring you.
Yeah.
It's like, it feels like it's maybe one of the biggest gauntlets in our job.
Yeah.
How do you sound check and keep your composure?
Yeah.
And not lose it? Do you have tricks? And can you tell me?
I don't think I have any tricks for sound check, or maybe I do. Actually, I do have tricks. I don't really do any of my music when I sound check. I just do I test vocals
play Bach.
in the range, and I play instrumental because I use some playback right now, so I check that. But I don't deliver any.
And do you know what? I
content.
didn't know that was allowed. In the early days of the Dresden Dolls, I thought that sound check is for checking sounds, and we had to play our sounds. But it was really hard.
Yeah,
so I was like, I don't want to play my sounds with all of these barbacks ignoring us. Our sounds are sacred sounds. And why are they ignoring us?
I know.
And no one told me. No one told me. Just play a blues jam. You'll get, those are the same sounds. You'll get the same levels. You don't have to sing about your rape at soundcheck. Someone should have put that up on the rules. I just didn't fucking know. And there's no handbook. Yeah. It's amazing that there's no handbook. You would think with the number of thousands and thousands of artists doing this job, there would be a really good handbook. How to tour your rape songs by us. Maybe we should do it.
Okay.
We'll Patreon it. It'll be the next thing. We could get a great corporate sponsor. Yeah. I'm just trying to think. I don't know, Tampax or razor blades.
Tampax.
Tampax and razor blades.
And Exacto.
A co-sponsored tour. And Chase Bank. Of course, our fave. We should probably end it there because we have a show to go play. In closing, if there's someone who's out there who is probably, let's say, possibly female and 19 years old and living in some town in Montana and is going, oh my God, I think I've just decided that I'm so inspired by this podcast, I'm going to go start an extreme music act.
Oh God, do it.
What's your advice for her?
Oh, please do. And fucking do it. Just do it. That's all. I mean, there's no, I think one of the things that I've learned and that I've finally accepted is that there's no right way to do it. There's no right way to be a survivor. Some days I'm a terrible mess and a terrible person, and some days I'm super strong. There's no fucking right way. All it is just doing it and getting up and actually doing it, and then making mistakes, fucking up, keep doing it. Everything is fucked. Keep going. That's all.
Words to live by. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's go kick some shit out of some shit.
Let's do it.
That is the end. Thank you for listening to The Art of Asking Everything. Thank you so much to Kristin Hayter, a.k.a. Lingua Ignota, for coming into my life, sharing her art, for conversing. I would like to thank Jessica Gardner for recording the interview. Jessica's actually a documentarian who followed me all around South by Southwest and made a documentary that you can actually check out through the Patreon. I'll add the link to that if you want to see it. And just a reminder that this interview is a preview of my podcast to come. It's going to be called The Art of Asking Everything. It's going to be out hopefully this fall. I've got a ton of really great interviews that I'm super excited to share with you. And it is going to be ad-free with no commercial potential, thanks to the 15,000 people that are supporting me on Patreon, making this all possible without having to do any corporate tie-ins or ads. So if you're one of those 15,000 people, thank you so much. If you aren't one of them, please become one of them. You can join the Patreon for $1 a month or more if you're inclined, and that will get you all of these podcasts straight to your inbox. Otherwise, the podcast is going to be available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. Signing off from Edinburgh, it's Amanda fucking Palmer.